Hi folks, my name's Darren and I wanted to kitbash VULKAN HESTAN. In this kitbash I used the Adrax Agatone model as a base. It made perfect sense as it had all the salamander motifs on there already. However, I did want to change the silhouette to mix it up a bit so it didn't look exactly like the original model. First off, I removed the loincloth from the belt of Adrax. I wanted to replace this later on with a scaled loincloth as per the original model. I did need to keep that bit aside though, as it does have the shin pad for the right leg attached to it. Once I'd removed it, I then used my scalpel to tidy up any scraggly bits of plastic left over. Next up, I came in with my clippers to remove the symbol in the belt buckle. This was a little bit heavy-handed in hindsight, but I needed to get as much as I could off first before I went in with my hobby knife and my sanding sticks to make it as smooth as possible. It's a bit overkill, but it did the job. Using the Red Grass Gaming sprue cutters that I was kindly sent by them, I removed one of the pauldrons from the Salamander Primaris upgrade kit, as I was going to use the symbol as the symbol on the belt buckle. Once I'd removed all the excess plastic around the symbol, I then got my glue and stuck it on the belt buckle. If you're interested in picking up some of the Red Grass Gaming clippers, I do have an affiliate link in the description below. As always, and as everyone says, it doesn't cost you anything extra and I get a little something back to help support the channel. Next up, I chop away as much of that loincloth as I can away from that shin pad. Once I'd cleared the majority of it off with clippers, I then went in with my hobby knife or scalpel and just removed as much as I could to get it as smooth as I could. I wasn't too fussed about it being rough, as I knew I was going to be covering up most of it with the scaled loincloth later on. I then removed his legs from the sprue, removed any sprue tabs and cleaned up any mould lines. Next up, I removed the remaining shin pad from the sprue, tidied it up and stuck it straight onto the leg. Quickly followed by the other shin pad, which I trimmed down earlier. The next step was to work on the decorative panel of the chest piece, so I removed it from the sprue and with my hobby saw began to gently hack away at the tilting shield that was attached to it. I had to be very careful with this because if I had gone too far and too quickly, I would have cut off most of the chest piece and it would have looked horrific. So I took my time and managed to slowly remove it. I kept the tilting shield as it's something that I was going to be using later on. I then went in with my hobby knife and my sanding sticks just to neaten up what has been left over. I always do test fits just to make sure that the piece that I'm working on is actually working with the rest of the model. This also gave me a good opportunity to level off the plastic even more to make sure it fit in line with the rest of the chest piece. I also quickly snipped off the hose that went through the chest piece, as I was going to be using a different helmet. There was absolutely no work that needed to be done to the back end and the cloak of this model, as it was already perfect. So all I did is removed it from the sprue, removed any sprue tabs and tidied up any mould lines. Happy with how the decorative chest piece was looking, I then glued it to the rest of the torso. I then glued the legs to the rest of the body. Another straightforward task of removing the weird armour plate bits that stick on some of the Space Marines these days. I wasn't going to do anything to amend these or adjust these, I didn't really need to, so I just removed them from the sprue, tidied them up and left them to the side, ready to glue to the model. Any fan of the Salamanders will know that the Black Ark Corsair kit is a goldmine for lovely detailed scaly bits, and for this Kitbash it was no exception. I was going to be using one of the cloaks as a makeshift loincloth. Using a combination of my hobby knife and hobby saw, I removed the bits that I didn't really want, or the bits that didn't make sense as being part of the loincloth. Once again, always made frequent comparisons against the model to see if it fit or what other bits I needed to remove. Remember, you can remove more, but you can never put stuff back on, so always make small controlled cuts. That's the point I'm trying to get to. Once I was happy with the overall fit of the piece, I then glued it in place. I was a bit unhappy with the way that the top of the loincloth was sitting against the belt buckle. There were some gaps, so I went back to the Black Ark Corsair kit and snipped off one of these arms that had a chain attached to it. I was then going to use this chain to mask that gap ever so expertly. Once I removed the piece from the sprue, I used my hobby knife to slowly remove the chain away from the arm and the spear that it was attached to. Once it had been cleaned up, I then glued it into place. No one will ever know. Actually, you will, because I just said that's what I'm going to do. Anyway. Next up was the left arm. I used the arm that was on the sprue already, as it had most of the components that I needed. I was going to be keeping the flamer, as I was going to be using it to turn into Hestan's gauntlet. I was also going to be keeping the shoulder part of the arm, as it was a perfect fit for the shoulder joint that was already there. So I got my hobby saw out and removed the upper part of the arm from the lower part of the arm. I then got a left arm from the Primaris Intercessor kit and proceeded to use my clippers to remove the shoulder joint from the rest of the arm. This would allow me to connect the two pieces together and ensure they looked like they were actually in proportion to each other, rather than one being a stupidly elongated arm. It was at this point where I used some blue tack to do some dry fitting. I stuck the Primaris Intercessor arm on and then attached the tilting plate to the forearm. This was going to be that shielded part of Hestan's gauntlet. I wanted to make sure that the flamer was going to be sitting well with the arm and the way it was positioned. so I made a quick comparison check and then I stuck the arm, once I was happy, to the rest of the body. Next up, I tackled the flamer itself by using my clippers to remove the back end just after where the pipe connects. The flamer wasn't quite sitting flush with the underarm, so what I did is got my hobby knife and removed the skull that was on the side of the casing. This allowed for a better connection between the points that I wanted to glue it to. And then with one last comparison, I glued the flamer into place. I did actually remove the pipe work from the flamer off camera, but I did keep it aside as I was going to use it for pipe work again. I know, trust me, there is a process. And here is some footage of me gluing that pipe work into place. However, I didn't record the bit where I actually cut the pipe work up, because I'm a consummate professional. Once the piece was in place, I used my hobby knife to gently coerce it by stabbing it to make sure it fit, before finally gluing the tilting shield to the forearm. And oh look, another piece of pipework. Again, I forgot to record this bit, but there's another piece of pipework there. Let's just move on with our lives. It was at this point where I was really struggling with the build. I was happy with how it was going, it was just lots of little fiddly bits, and what would happen though, I would get into a rut where I would forget to record things because I was so focused on making sure that these bits fit or worked. But this wasn't the worst to come. I clipped away the backpack from the Blade Guard Veteran Captain sprue. Like I said before in previous videos, I've got 5 of these, so they've come in very handy. Poor Blade Guard veterans, they have no backpacks, but I needed that halo. I removed any sprue tabs, cleaned up any mould lines, and then with my clippers I removed the little peg that was inside the backpack. I didn't need the spikes around the iron halo, so again I got my clippers and removed all those. Very satisfying. Next up, I removed the backpack from the Adrax Agatone sprue. I didn't clean up too much on here as I only really needed the flame and the smoke. But what I did need to do is remove the metal kind of chalice that was holding the flame. So I got my clippers and started hacking away at it. Once again, I made frequent comparisons as I needed to be sure that when I took bits off that it was going to fit nicely against this iron halo. I didn't want it to seem like it was stuck on, even though it is stuck on, if that makes sense. Plus, I didn't want to try to attempt to use some green stuff because you'll see what happens later on. Once I'd cut and sanded it down and was happy with how it was looking, I then glued it to the iron halo. Onto the right arm now, and once again I raided the Primaris Intercessor kit and found this right arm holding a bolt pistol. I removed the pistol from the arm and glued it to the torso. I was rummaging through my bits box and I managed to find this spear shaft from, I think it's from a Grey Knight's kit, but I must have used the spear tip at some point for something else, I can't quite remember. However, this was perfect for what I needed for the Histan model. I needed a spear tip for Histan's spear, so I dipped into the Vindictor's kit from the Age of Sigmar. I had loads of these lying around as I got the Stormbringer magazine which had spare, and I had the Dominion box set as well, so nothing was wasted. Well, apart from the rest of the yarn. But I can do some of that, I'm sure I can. I removed the spear tip from the sprue and then ended up removing the extra part where the spikes were attached, as I didn't quite like the extended bit. I removed the little diamond emblem from the spear and then stuck it to the rest of the shaft. Step 1. Delude yourself of success by starting off strong. Step 2. After seductively lubricating a sculpting tool, use said tapered tool to roll out a level sheet of green stuff. Step 3. Use a small needle to poke holes into a transfer sheet that is far too exposed for the camera to pick up, whilst all the time struggling to hold the needle because your fingers still have Vaseline on them. Step 4. Start to use the needle as an engraving tool, hoping it will show more of an outline whilst your fingers are still covered in Vaseline. And step number 5. Do what you should probably have done at the start to avoid all the hassle you've given yourself by using a knife. These were my 2 attempts at using the green stuff. Not too bad. The first one not so great, the second one better. Then I switched to plasticard. This one that I did I was a lot happier with. However, the one that I ended up with is the one I was happy with the most. One of the final details was to remove the plume from the Primaris Captain sprue, the one that I used when I created Pedro Cantor. As what we're going to do, we're going to cut this and trim this down to give that kind of metallic ridge or metallic plume, as it were, on top of Hestan's helmet. For his helmet, I used the helmeted version of Agatone, and because I was so stressed with the green stuff, I completely forgot to record that I used various bits of the Black Ark Corsair cloaks to kind of create a frayed part of Hestan's cloak over his right shoulder pad. You'll see it, but yeah, my bad. And here he is, my interpretation of Forge Father Vulkan Hestan. I want to apologise a little bit for the time it's taken for this video to come out and for the quality of the video. I've had some problems with software and hardware and things like that. However, hopefully all should be resolved for the next video. A big thank you once again for all your continued support. It really does mean a lot to me. If you could comment, like, share to someone who might enjoy this, or subscribe, that would mean the world to me. I also have a Patreon set up now. It's only got 1 tier, it's only £1. I'm just dipping my toe into the world of Patreon, as it were. So if you want to support me that way, then feel free to do that. A link will be in the description below. But yeah, that's me. That's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye.